Restoring Men in History, and today is a good one. Founding Fathers History. Why is their history important? Why is freedom important? How does history affect your freedoms? There's a certain faction that wants to tear it down, destroy history, so you don't know it, so you don't have a heritage, so you don't have common bonds. How does that affect your freedoms? Here's an article that'll be relevant for a long time. Talks about the founders and the history, and as statues topple, so do our freedoms, by Tim Goeglein, October 16, 2023. He says, to preserve our freedoms, our nation must stop going down the road of condemning rather than celebrating our nation's founders. 100% we agree. We are restoring men in history. And we just did a conference where we talked about some of the founders, Patrick Henry and others. Now, watch what he says. And this is current, but it's also relevant for a long time. This can be important for years. New York City is considering the removal of statues celebrating several significant historical figures, including Christopher Columbus and perhaps George Washington, the exceptional man himself, father of our country, an exceptional man, George Washington, a hero. And we want men to be more like George Washington, not less, at Restoring Men in History. You could have the virtues of George Washington, you would be a great man. So we're not only going to honor George Washington, we're going to celebrate. We're going to go the opposite of the left and the Marxist. He goes on, the problem with Washington, he says. Problem with Washington, he owned slaves and is now being considered for it. So, and then he goes on to say it was his leadership that enabled the creation of the United States. Absolutely 100%. For that, he's to be canceled and erased from history. Why? Because Maoism must tear down, Marxism must tear down, destroy, critical theory must destroy. So like it wanted to destroy beauty, we just did a beauty on beauty and Victoria's Secret and how external beauty is important to a society. George Washington's important, that we know about him, that we honor him, that we celebrate him, and that we create more men like George Washington and more men like Patrick Henry. We love those men. George Washington was a hero of mine growing up. Patrick Henry was a hero of mine growing up. We need more men, not less men, like those men. Now he goes on to talk about, and this guy's no conservative, Alan Dershowitz. So if you were hearing me talk about George Washington, it would be much more heightened than this man's opinion, because George Washington, let's face it, without George Washington, we probably wouldn't have America. I don't think we'd have a Constitution for sure. I don't think they would have combined, probably. Alan Dershowitz and Andrew Stein criticized the new understanding of Washington themselves, and they're not on the right. George Washington did benefit from slavery, although he had emancipated his own slaves upon his death. People forget that. But what he accomplished for other people changed the face of America for the better. There probably wouldn't have been a United States not for General Washington. So he's talking about General. He demanded equal rights for all those of religious persuasion, sending letters to various leaders. Okay. Certainly that and his other good, well, he did great deeds, not just good deeds. So this is very underestimated with George Washington's qualities, right? This underestimates him, those comments, because he was truly a great man. Another article goes on to state that if the city's Cultural Affairs Committee decides not to remove the statues, they will instead install this, get this, an explanatory plaque like you that basically tell the public of these individuals' perceived cultural sins. What are the sins of people of today? And what would Washington think of them? Hilarious, right? Men that think they can be women, what would George Washington think about that guy? Women that think they can be men, what would Washington, and how would he react to that? He'd be a gentleman about it, but he would certainly think, these people are crazy. All right. Both Hamilton and Jefferson had to encourage Washington to run for that first term. Now, he goes on to say, maybe, perhaps. I don't think the country would have worked. All the people in the states went for Washington, and he was the glue that held it together. He was extraordinarily important to this country and nation, and I don't believe it would have come together without General Washington first, and then President Washington. Here they're talking about General Washington, but without President Washington, and he didn't seek power. There's so much to talk about Washington. I don't want to get hung up today and make this a biography of Washington, because we could, ladies and gentlemen, we could. So maybe I'll mention a few things about Washington, but he was an extraordinary man, concerned with the virtues, concerned with improving himself. And that's what we want you to do, both ladies and gentlemen, improve yourselves, get 1% better each year. George Washington wrote a book called Rules of Civility. He wrote this list and he wanted to follow it to better himself. He was considerate of others. But let's go on. And Hamilton and Jefferson both told him the only way the country will work is for him to run for president. He really wanted to be on his farm, many historians said. Father of our country. Patrick Henry didn't want to leave Virginia, so there wasn't that option. But you had George Washington and Patrick Henry, right? What is the real problem? The real problem is these men stood for freedom. These men were patriots, and they don't want you to see concrete examples, you men, of patriots like George Washington, Patrick Henry, and the founders. That's the real issue. Because what? If you see a good role model as men, and we talk about role models, and George Washington is a phenomenal role model. You can be like George Washington, you will be a great man. You can be as good, half as good as Washington, you'll be an exceptional man. Washington and the founders taught you to stand for unalienable rights. Thomas Jefferson did. They taught you to stand for freedom over tyranny. And they showed you how to do it. So they don't want you to know this history. They don't want you to be pleased with it, proud of it. And pride is not a great virtue. So, but the point, humility is great. But Washington had humility, by the way. Washington had courage. He had humility. If we go through the list of virtues today, Washington had all those that you as men and ladies want to have. But especially you men want to have courage, loyalty. He had that. So if you know the history of Mao and communism, what do they have to do? They have to tear down the history. That way what? You don't have a common bond. If we share in the founders, we have a common experience that we can relate back to and say, those guys were fantastic. And we came from them. And we're going to carry on the torch of liberty. And these founders were concerned about posterity, the future of America. They wanted it to last. Who thinks about that today? We're very short-term thinkers in America and into gratification. These founders thought ahead. They prepared well. They made a great constitution. It's a story about wiping out our history, this faction. They want to wipe your history so you can't stand for freedom. They want to wipe your history so you don't know what a man looks like. And we want men in the world. We need men. We need strong, courageous men. Washington shows you, concrete example, he led the charge at Princeton himself as a general. That's courage, ladies and gentlemen. That's courage. We'd appreciate it if you like this video, share it and comment. It helps the algorithm if you like and comment. So this is an assault on heroes because the left doesn't want you to have heroes. It doesn't want you to have your heritage. It doesn't want you to have common bonds. They don't want to develop men. They want to turn them into women, right? They want to feminize them. Feminism, they don't want women to see what a strong man looks like. Strike on the founding. Make it appear so wicked you don't study it, you don't appreciate it, you don't honor it. Make you ashamed of America's past to what? Destroy it to, for what gain? Power. To divide you, to get us fighting and divide us. We wipe out the history of freedom and the history of men who fought for it. They risk all. They pledge their lives, fortune, and sacred honor to each other for you, for your children and grandchildren. Men who were selfless. They wanted America to last. They lived for a larger purpose than just themselves. Today, we're very self-interested. About us. It's all about us, right? Today, tomorrow, how can we have fun instead of fulfillment? They thought about the future. They thought, what kind of country can last? They debated it. And we could sit here all day. I'm going to have to be careful because we'll come back and make some more videos. I just gave a big conference speech on the founders, so we want to be careful today and not go way over. But George Washington was a strong hero of courage. Society and feminism don't want strong men. Totalitarians don't want strong men, right? Because they will stand up to them. Tyranny doesn't like strong heroes. So there's a lot of reasons to destroy our history, our heritage, our shared culture, our bonds that we have together. And a country needs sovereignty, and a country needs borders, and a country needs shared American principles that were in the past and continued on to today. And it's up to you and me to carry it on and continue it. George Washington was a patriot. He was a patriarch. And maybe we'll come back at another time and read the letter he wrote to his stepdaughter. He was a great stepfather. They weren't even his children. They were Martha's children. And he guided them and he cared for them. Lawrence and the daughter, the stepdaughter. And we could sit here for days on George Washington. Courage, the charge he led at Princeton. But he left in that letter magnificent advice for the stepdaughter. He focused on living with virtue. He wrote a book called Rules of Civility, where he focused on consideration of others and bettering himself. George Washington's the kind of man those factions don't want to face and don't want us to be as men. They don't want us to be Patrick Henry, George Washington, George Wythe, Sam Adams. The father of a country, think about what that means if you can destroy the father of the country. If you can wipe out the father of the country, they're trying to wipe out feminine women, they're trying to wipe out masculine men, they're trying to wipe out the fathers. Notice how cultural Marxism just destroys, Mr. Wilson. Tears down, critical theory destroys. Men need role models, and George Washington was one of the greatest role models. He strove for excellence. If these people attacking him had half his courage, half his honor, they'd all be there. His loyalty, his love of country, he loved this country. Considerate of others, humble man, full of humility. Now he goes on to say, the irony of this is that these individuals who created what? In time became the freest country on earth. That's right. We are still the freest country on earth, I believe. We have to stand for it. These generations are now being attacked as oppressors. They get into this victim. Oppressors by the far left were actually deliverers. That's correct. They created this country. They built it. They made it great. It's up to us to carry it on. They created the greatest nation on earth, the most fantastic constitution written down on a piece of paper, and the Declaration of Independence. Think about that. Think about the documents they created in the country they created and the American principles they stood upon. Oh, going on, he states they delivered our country from the evil of slavery, even though Washington, Jefferson, and the Founding Fathers did own slaves. Guaranteed freedom of speech. We talk about that all the time. Freedom of religion. Yes, they did. They set in motion the end of slavery. He goes on, but now because of the new enlightenment from those who believe they are woke, they have become villains beyond redemption and must be erased from national memory. This is a battle for your heritage, and there's a reason they need to erase them. If you want to change a country and transform it into communism, you need to eliminate what? Its heroes of freedom and men. Then there'll be no one to stand in your way. So they don't want men seeing heroes. They don't want you to know your history. They want to wipe your history, wipe women, wipe men, so they have power. So they can do what they want and have communism, globalism, whatever it is they want, but power, right? In the end, they want more power. You divide people, you gain power. Make people hate their heritage, you turn people against each other, you get more power. Make you not proud of your country or pleased with your country, so you want to change it, transform it. Oh, it's all bad, it's all bad. It's not what we want, we're going to stand against it. Cultural Marxists attack beauty, they attack the founders, they just destroy these cultural Marxist guys, bad guys. Now watch this. GWE says, he goes on, let's go back to the article, drops Colonial's nickname. For instance, in July 2020, George Washington established a committee to consider a request for the school's nickname, the Colonials, to be retired because the name honored the school's namesake, who was castigated for glorifying colonialism and being a negatively charged figure. Honoring Washington would be in there. This is George Washington University. This is how crazy it is. Insanity. Glorifying the act of systematic oppression. They always talk about systematic racism, systematic oppression. This is their thing, right? If you want power, create this oppressor oppresses, oppressor oppressed. Then you've got people divided, rich and poor, old and young, vaccinated and unvaccinated, creating that. So they divide us. Look, guys, we got to get together on the freedom side. Come on over to the freedom side. 2 years later, the school committee, to absolutely no surprise, to encourage it, was changing the school's nickname, which was first chosen in 1928. Selected it like thoughtful university-wide consideration. He states, I doubt those who chose the name 97 years ago thought it was possible thoughtlessness of the colonial's nickname. In 1926, George Washington and the colonists fought for our freedom. Who fought for our freedom were heroes to be honored, and respect for the sacrifice they made, unified instead of divided our country. We were proud of the freedom that sacrifice provided. We don't talk about sacrifice enough in America today. Instead of being ashamed of it, we should be pleased with these founders and what they accomplished. We should celebrate them. They're important to your heritage. They're important to continuing this country. If we do not honor it, we will see our country gone. Let's honor these men that created the country. How many Washingtons are there today? How many men or women have the honor of George Washington? As the saying goes, his virtues. How many have given so much money, so much time, so much energy for this country? Who can say that? Can these people attacking him? No. Washington did so much for you. Sacrifice time, money, energy. Now, we could talk all day about George Washington, but let me just say this. How many career politicians do you know that just hold on to power? Think about the senators today on both sides that just keep holding on to power. Patrick Henry wanted to stay in Virginia. He didn't want power. George Washington didn't want power. Like I said, Hamilton and Jefferson had to talk him into running, and they especially had to write a letter and talk him into running the second term. He didn't want it. He wanted to get back to the farm. He wanted to give up power. He walked away from power not once, multiple times. And they tear him down. They couldn't hold his boot, let's much put it on. You know what King George said of George Washington? One day near the end of the Revolutionary War, this is before he's president, the king began to talk about America. Farrington wrote, he asked West what would Washington do were America to be declared independent. West said he believed he would retire to a private situation. King said if he did, he would be the greatest man in the world. On December 23, 1783, West's predictions came true. When Washington resigned his commission as commander of the Continental Army and returned to private life at Mount Vernon, who does that? Look at the politicians today, how long they say they were statesmen then, a lot of them. Patrick Henry and George Washington gave up power, didn't go for it. Washington here, and the king's talking about him, he resigned that commission. He could have had more. He didn't want it. That's a man you aspire to be. That is an exceptional hero. For just that, and there's plenty of other acts, we could go into his life. I guess we'll come back and do a video on George Washington. So he goes on, historical context. Yes, Washington owned slaves, so did Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence. By the way, they wrote it on a piece of paper. Perhaps the most eloquent blueprint of freedom ever written, and whose statue has already been removed by the new interpreters of history. But as in all history, we must understand Washington's and Jefferson's decision and action in their historical and social context, because we have learned as a society that slavery was not acceptable. Well, in fact, slavery is wicked. We're all opposed to it. Nobody's for slavery. We ended it, though. He goes on. This is why I wrote my recent book. He wrote a book called Toward a More Perfect Union, the Moral and Cultural Case for Teaching the Great American Story. So we'll plug his book here to provide this balance and understand our nation's history and heritage and show how we as Americans will pay the ultimate price. This is what we worry about here, losing our freedoms. Come over to the freedom side. The loss of freedoms these imperfect men, and we are all imperfect, stood and fought for. By removing Washington, Jefferson, and so many others from our national memory, we continue down the road of culture and political amnesia. That's what the Maoists want. That's what the Marxists want, by the way, to destroy your heritage and your history so that you can't be pleased with the past. You can't honor and celebrate them. So you can't stand proudly on their shoulders and say, they did it right, and we're going to do it like them, and we're going to stand against tyranny. That's why they want to tear these guys down. They want power, more. So you won't know how a man acts and looks. Restoring men. And how would Washington think? Again, it'd be funny, right? If Washington came back today and some man said, I'm a woman, call me Martha. He goes, that's my wife's name, right? He would think they're insane. So how will history judge them? The founders are a model for men. They took risks, they sacrificed, they have all the virtues of courage. They took risk, and they did it for a larger purpose than themselves. They thought about tomorrow, the future. In his book, The War on History, Jarrett Stepman writes about those who are calling for the destruction of statues and monuments celebrating the founders of our country. There is a spreading belief that the men who built this country were oppressive and their values irredeemable. The purveyors of this view argue that we must transcend the ugly ideas, principles, and even the people of the past to perfect our society. Yeah, right. We must transform America by wiping out previous generations celebrated as no, we must see them as exceptional men and ladies. No, thank you, sir. We will stand and honor them and celebrate them. There's a faction that desires more power. To rule us, they must wipe them out. Wipe out the past, wipe out the history. Now, he goes on to end with this. We cannot allow such transformation to happen, as we have seen with other nations. Once memories have been erased, freedoms are as well. It is my hope that our nation does not continue to go down this road, but will return to celebrate our nation's founders. Well, we will, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to restore history and restore the founders and celebrate them and honor them. Because we know for it to be a strong society, we need what? Strong men, strong women. And the history we need to retain. We need to restore. We need to teach. We need to educate with it. Give men role models like Patrick Henry and George Washington. We will talk about them. If more men could be half like Washington, this country would be a lot better. And he walked away from power a second time after the presidency. Didn't even want to run the second time. Walked away from power, a man of humility, suffering those winters, charging from the front. If we could all be half like Washington, this country would be better. Great stepfather. How many fathers could be as good a stepfather as George Washington was to kids that weren't even his own? And I've read the letters. He cared about them. He wanted them to be better. He wanted to be better. What if we could all be 1% better and work on self-improvement like Rules of Civility taught? Make ourselves 1% better. We want you men to be 1% better. We want you ladies to be 1% better. So let's make America great again by knowing the past, honoring the founders. Make men great again by knowing the past and knowing these role models so you men can be great like them. Here's the action step. Talk about the fathers when you're out at cigar bars or wherever you're out. Honor the founding fathers. Stand up for them because your heritage is important. They wipe out your history, they will wipe this country out. And there's a faction trying to do it right now, trying to wipe the founders, wipe history so you don't know it, so you don't also have that bond of what they accomplished for you, so that we can't carry the torch of liberty on. We love America. We love American principles, and we will stand up for them. So now it's up to you to defend the Founding Fathers and carry on the torch of liberty. Thank you. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. It helps the algorithm. We would really appreciate that. Thank you and have a good day.